At the end of part 1, we stopped with a list of possible suspects for the List case. Some are stronger possibilities than others, but 2 stand out in particular and have become the main focus for a lot of people interested in the case. The last of the 5 suspects listed last week was James Burke, a lovable rogue in uniform, fondly known throughout the Suffolk County Police Department as Starsky. At the moment, we have a number of comments from a certain Chris Loeb stating that Burke implicated himself in the List case when threatening Chris and his family. He allegedly insinuated that they would meet the same fate as the Gilgo Beach 4. Chris also stated that one of the items he had taken from Burke was a snuff film. Other accusations of Chris's have been verified. This might suggest that Chris's account is trustworthy, but that can never be definitively established. It's therefore necessary to do a bit more digging with regards to James Burke. One aspect of Burke's character that will become abundantly clear is that he finds it difficult to keep his private and professional life separated. This crossover between private and professional might explain some of the actions and events connected to him, but that will be for you, the viewer, to judge. So, who is James Burke? Well, he grew up on Long Island in a family heavily connected with law enforcement. Both his father and grandfather were police officers. He started his career at the age of 21 with a brief spell in the NYPD. He then soon went east back to his childhood stomping ground of Suffolk County, where he started his long career as a patrol officer. Along the way to becoming the head honcho, he was an officer within the undercover narcotics section, a sergeant at 25, an investigator on the district's attorney's team of detectives, and by the time we get to the initial stages of the Lisk investigation, he was a lead detective in that same DA's office. All well and good up until now, but a few questions begin to arise once we look into Burke's track record. Let's just say he didn't go rogue on meeting Christopher Loeb. The man was a maverick, and his unorthodox style first came under scrutiny when a young woman got into trouble and decided to spill the beans on what she described as a crack-using ladies' man within the SCPD. These allegations led to an internal affairs investigation wherein which the claims were substantiated, minus the allegations of drug use. So here's a rundown of those substantiated claims. In 1995, police looked into a possible alliance between Burke and a damsel by the name of Loretta Rickenbacker, a convicted felon involved in the sale and supply of drugs, and she also dabbled in theft and worked in the sex trade. Burke did admit to having a 6-month relationship with the woman. It said that he would use his bleeper to make contact, pick her up and head to a motel, his home, or if time was against him, he'd do the deeds in his service vehicle. All that aside, the public can rest assured that he had no knowledge of her previous criminal history. Still, the internal affairs investigators concluded the following. 1. He had been in a relationship with a convicted felon. 2. He had used his police vehicle as a base for sexual acts while on duty and in uniform. And 3. He failed to safeguard his service weapon and other departmental property. Internal Affairs even learned that Burke had kindly lent his service vehicle to her so she could roll on over to a friend's house. Ultimately, Burke's behaviour constituted, and I quote, conduct unbecoming of an officer. His punishment? He had 15 paid vacation days taken from him, and he was moved to another Suffolk County Police precinct. This information did not become public knowledge until 2013, when Newsday, a Long Island circular, published details on receiving leaked documents relating to the investigation. The first question you might be asking yourself is, why was the punishment so lenient? And secondly, how did this beacon of the police department get to the position of Chief of Police? The first question is quite easy to answer. It was likely considered easier to put his dabblings with a known criminal to the side. No need to rock the boat. The second question is pretty easy to answer too, because we got the answer from individuals high up in local government. Steve Bellone, the county executive in 2013, simply backed Burke on the basis that he was a positive force for change in the SCPD. He also handled the media spotlight in a suave manner, and he said all the right things. Essentially, he was a good poster boy for all things Suffolk County. So what if he had a history with prostitutes and was leading an investigation into the murder of at least 8 women and 1 man thought to be in the same trade? His involvement with prostitutes doesn't end there. In fact, one woman came forward to John Ray, the attorney representing the estate of the woman who got the ball rolling when it came to all things Lisk, Shannon Gilbert. This woman, going by the name of Leanne, signed a sworn affidavit stating she had attended sex parties in the Oak Beach area of Long Island, a mere 10-minute drive from where the bodies were found along Ocean Parkway. Leanne publicly stated in a press conference to media that James Burke was an attendee of these parties and that she herself was paid to perform sex acts with Burke. She described him as arrogant and given to demeaning her and treating other women present in a rough manner. She also confirmed the use of illicit drugs. What is more disturbing is the fact that her encounters with Burke happened in April and August of 2011, not long after police had confirmed they had 10 suspected victims of a possible serial killer. As we've seen, Burke has quite a few skeletons in his closet. But what is the circumstantial evidence tying him to the case, and what can we make of these connections? Many have highlighted the 1995 probe into professional misconduct as an indicator of bad character, but we're talking about a serial killer. And just because James Burke likes to kick it with criminals and prostitutes doesn't mean he's out and about executing women in his free time. This being said, there are some red flags when it comes to the man. Some are fact and some are based on statements from people that have worked with him. I think the best place to start is by looking at some of the actions taken by Burke when he became Chief of Police. We can then examine them in tandem with decisions made and executed by others linked to the investigation, namely the District Attorney's Office. James Burke became Chief of Police 2 weeks after the discovery of Shannon Gilbert on the 14th of December 2011. At the time, the Lisk investigation was at the top of the SCPD's priority list, and Burke made it known that his main intention was fighting the perpetrator and getting justice for the victims and families. If we're to take him at his word, he went about things in a pretty unusual way. One of his first decisions, as the main man about the department, was to kick lead investigator of the Lisk task force, Dominic Verone, to the curb. Verone was told that he had 15 days to get his retirement papers in order or face being demoted. From the outside, this might appear strange, but he may well have thought that the case needed a shake-up and some fresh faces might lead to some developments in the case. However, that doesn't explain why he didn't ask for a debrief or an overview of the case from Verone. After all, he had been the lead detective for the previous 15 months, and one would assume he had information relevant to those who were going to replace him.
I'm awaiting the autopsy results. I'm still into this case 100%. Yeah, there are rumors that Chief Burke is going to become the 4-star chief or the chief of the department. But I feel that's okay. You know, I'm going to get along. We're going to get this done. And 2 days later, on December 15th, I was told, get the hell out. I am told that I have 15 days to put in my retirement papers or be demoted to captain. Very shocking. Punched in the stomach, hit a brick wall, describe it any way you want to. It was just extremely upsetting and disturbing to me. Even more disturbing and upsetting that their arrogance would not even allow them to talk to me or debrief me and discuss the thoughts that I had and the theories that I had and where I thought the case should go and what we should do in the ensuing months.
Those who were to replace Verone were detective supervisors working out of the office of the district attorney, Tom Spotta, a close associate of Burke's, who had also served prison time in connection with his involvement with the Christopher Loeb scandal. It was Spotta who attempted to silence police officers when the FBI started sniffing around to see if the Loeb allegations held water. The next action to raise more than a few curious eyebrows was Burke's decision to tell the FBI to clear off. They had been assisting the SCDP with a range of skills, including their renowned capabilities in the area of behavioural analysis. Considering the level of expertise possessed by the FBI, this decision was in no uncertain terms absurd. How can a person declare that his main aim as chief of police was to solve the most pressing case on the books, while getting rid of a bureau famous the world over for their skills in tracking down killers? Suffolk County legislator Rob Trotta has his own ideas as to why this decision was made.
I think Jimmy Burke hated the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, the IRS, anything federal he wanted nothing to do with, because those were the only people who could get him. With the exception of those groups, those federal organizations, he was the king.
Another decision taken by Burke was his halting of searches for more victims. The reason? The winter weather. But why would anyone act in such a manner? We could be kind and say that he thought that the FBI were getting in the way. Or maybe he thought under his leadership the SCPD had the wherewithal to crack on and make progress. But none of this seems reasonable. Added to this, there seems to have been a concerted effort on the part of other sections of Suffolk County's legal apparatus to impede upon the investigation. When Burke takes the top seat, the SCDP begins to resemble the DA's office, who had done everything to make the investigator's job more difficult. Previous to Burke's promotion, the DA, headed by Tom Spotta, had made decisions which clearly showed that they did not want to cooperate with federal agencies such as the FBI. For example, when the FBI's Behavioural Analysis Unit had asked for access to the SPD's documents and photos on the List case, they were refused. Tom Spotta told them that they could sit down and take notes while the documents were read to them, but they could not physically read them. Current Chief of Police Geraldine Hart had this to say.
When the Behavioural Analysis Unit came to Long Island, to Suffolk County, to conduct their in-person investigation, the DA's office would not even allow them to touch the crime scene reports or the photos. The DA, Tom Spotta, who headed up the homicide section, would read to the Behavioural Analysis Unit what they thought the FBI should know. That's really just kind of sums it up on what the relationship was like and what the district attorney's office thought about having the FBI fully involved in this case.
As you can see, there seems to be an element of law enforcement that wishes to control the case, and they clearly don't want anyone around that could possibly alter the way they want the case to develop, or not develop. But what could their reasons be? Do they simply want the case to fizzle out because it's drawing bad publicity, or do they have something they are trying to hide? A possible answer to the second of these questions requires a change of direction, and it involves the pleasure-seeking powwows on Oak Beach. As we know, it's been alleged that James Burke and other powerful residents of Suffolk County attended these get-togethers. Is there something happening here that they would prefer remained hush-hush? Oak Beach is an area that's come up time and time again. As we have seen, James Burke clearly has a connection with the place, but so do other suspects in the Lisk investigation. Last week we named 5 in all. 2 of them are Oak Beach residents. One person we can cover quite quickly is Joseph Brewer. As we have seen, he was the client of Shannon Gilbert. We know that she made a call from his house. We know that call was frenzied, and 2 men can be heard on the phone call, Joseph Brewer and her driver, Michael Pack. Some have speculated that Shannon witnessed and came in contact with a situation that greatly troubled her. Police, on the other hand, have claimed that she seemed to be experiencing a mental breakdown or suffering under the effects of a drug-induced psychosis. So we cannot in any way suggest that Brewer had any direct involvement in her death, nor can we suggest that Brewer had any connections with the other victims found along Ocean Parkway. However, there is a witness who has sworn under oath, namely Leanne, that Brewer was an attendee at some of the now infamous sex parties at Oak Beach. Therefore, we can at least link him to a scene that is beginning to feature as a possible cause for a cover-up. The next Oak Beach resident and neighbour of Joseph Brewer is the Dr. Peter Hackett. His behaviour in the aftermath of Shannon Gilbert's disappearance is highly suspect, to say the least. First of all, he made 2 calls to Marie Gilbert, Shannon's mother. One was made on the 3rd of May, 2 days after Shannon had vanished, the other being made on the 6th of May. The first call is odd because Shannon had yet to be reported as missing. In the call, Hackett relayed that he runs a home for wayward girls. He also states that Shannon arrived at his house on the day that she went missing. He reported her to be in a frenzied and bewildered state. Due to her condition, Hackett claims he administered sedatives to Shannon. The second anomaly revolves around his answer to a question asked by Marie Gilbert. She asked Hackett how he had acquired her number. Hackett's response was that he had got the number from Shannon on the morning that he first came in contact with her. On being asked by police why he had made these calls, Hackett denied that he had ever done so. This denial was rescinded when police told him that they had phone records supporting Marie Gilbert's claims. These 2 pieces of information raise a number of questions that require further examination. Firstly, how did he know that Shannon in particular was missing? There's no doubt that as a resident of Oak Beach, he may well have heard about a distressed girl running around the area, but it's unlikely that he would have known her by name. And even if he did, how would he have acquired Marie's number without having come into contact with Shannon, which is what he now claims? Police, after investigating Hackett, ruled him out as a suspect and publicly stated he was simply a man who had a reputation for inserting himself into prominent stories. This, however, seems strange, considering that Shannon Gilbert was not yet in the headlines, nor even reported missing. From an outsider's perspective, it does appear that Peter Hackett needs to give adequate explanations for his actions in the days after Gilbert's disappearance. One thing we do know is that we have yet another incident highlighting strange activity in the Oak Beach area.
What about all the other girls?
Jesus!
What was that?
My defibrillator.
Another suspect that we mentioned last week was a man by the name of James Bissett. He was a local entrepreneur and businessman, and two facets of his life have raised suspicion. He was a producer and seller of burlap, the material used by the killer when disposing of the bodies. It must also be stated that the information regarding the use of burlap has been obtained through the media. Law enforcement has neither confirmed nor denied this information. The second thing which has raised suspicion amongst the public is his death by suicide, which occurred 2 days after Shannon's disappearance. Other than these two threads, we do not really have anything definitive linking Bissett to either the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert nor the murders linked to the Long Island serial killer. At the moment, he seems to be an individual who is linked through circumstance and coincidence rather than anything substantial. When it comes to Oak Beach, we've heard of rumours involving wealthy and prestigious men attending drug-fueled sex parties. But we've also heard from a woman who under sworn oath named James Burke as an attendee at these parties. We also have her claim that Joseph Brewer was an attendee, and some have also speculated that even Dr. Peter Hackett was present. Suffolk County must be one hell of a place. Aside from these sworn statements, what do we have that possibly links Oak Beach to the Lisk investigation? In order to answer this question, we have to be honest in regards to James Burke's possible links. Some have gone so far as to suggest that James Burke could be responsible for the deaths of the 10 women. But what evidence do we have to suggest this is the case? Bluntly, there is a number of circumstantial connections that lead us to a dead end. Even if this is so, there's a number of speculative conclusions we can reach based on the evidence we have. As we've seen, there was a concerted effort to slow the Lisk investigation on the arrival of James Burke as Chief of Police. We also know that this was done in tandem with the District Attorney's Office under the leadership of Tom Spotta. The question we can now ask is, did these acts have anything to do with the events that were common on Oak Beach? It seems reasonable to suggest that an outside investigation headed up by the FBI while investigating the Lisk killings may have stumbled across information damaging to powerful people, including James Burke. Though it could simply be the case that a number of powerful men don't want their dirty laundry aired in public, we must also keep a number of possibilities open, and this should be the aim of those responsible for the investigation today. After all, Oak Beach is only a 10-minute drive from where the 10 bodies were discovered, and we don't know whether there's one, two, or multiple killers involved. Therefore, the possibility remains that some residents are hiding information about a killer or killers. There also may be a possibility that the killings are done within a group, as outlandish as that may seem. John Bittrolff was a carpenter from Manorville, Long Island. He had a stellar reputation amongst neighbours, that is until 2014, when DNA evidence linked him to murders committed 20 years previously. The two victims were Rita Tangredi and Colleen McNamee. He's also strongly believed to be the killer of Sandra Costilla. Rita, aged 31, was found on the 11th of March 1993 in wooded area off Esplanada Drive, East Patchogue. The last sighting of her occurred the day before as she was hitchhiking on Montauk Highway. The second victim, Colleen McNamee, was found on the 30th of January 1994, once again in wooded area in North Shirley, just south of the Long Island Expressway. She was last seen getting into a small blue car in front of the Blue Dawn Diner in Islandia on January 5th of the same year. Another suspected victim of Bittrolff was discovered in woodland in North Sea on the 20th of November 1993. He has yet to be convicted with this murder, but police have enough circumstantial evidence to suggest he is the killer. There's no surprise that Bittrolff's name has come up as a possible suspect in the Lisk investigations. He's a resident of Manorville, where partial remains were earlier found. These were later linked to remains found in 2011. Those victims were Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor. His home in Manorville is a 40-minute drive from the dumping ground. Robert Biancavilla, the Assistant Suffolk County DA, stated this: "There are remains of the victims at Gilgo that may be attributed to the handiwork of Bittrolff." However, Tom Spotta contradicted these claims when he previously stated that there was no evidentiary link between these two murders and any of the Gilgo victims. So what's with the later statement from the same DA's office? Many within the media have jumped on it, and many have gone as far as to say that Bittrolff is the standout suspect. But any investigative team would look into a man like Bittrolff, and we cannot read too much into the statement of Biancavilla. There's a few more scraps of circumstantial evidence, other than the proximity of Taylor's and Mack's body parts to the house of Bittrolff. For example, Rita Tangredi, the first known victim of Bittrolff's, had a daughter who was the best friend of Melissa Bartholomew, one of the Gilgo Four. It's been said that Bartholomew made a number of calls to Manorville in the weeks before she disappeared. Her mother made the following statements: "I don't know what to think, because Melissa had a lot of calls to Manorville from her phone, and that is where the guy is from. I am thinking that when he got arrested was when all this stopped again." We also know that Bittrolff was a hunter, and we might surmise that he is familiar with the Long Island terrain. Both of his known victims were prostitutes, but there is also a lot that points away from him being the killer. It's known that Bittrolff posed his victims in a notable way, and wood chippings were found near the remains of his victims. None of them had been dismembered in the same way that Taylor and Mack had been, and there was no attempt to hide their identities in the same way that the killer of Taylor and Mack had done. Simply put, Bittrolff wanted his victims to be found and seen in a certain light. John Ray has also rubbished the statement made by Biancavilla, calling them, and I quote, "nonsense." He went on to say, "The only similarities are they are all sex workers, and they are all dead, and they died violently. That doesn't mean Bittrolff is the guy." And that's where we end with Bittrolff. There is nothing left to be said other than he is another possible suspect who will likely be talked about whenever someone discusses the case. But like the other suspects, suspicion is unlikely to lead anywhere unless some other evidence is put forward by police linking one of the five in ways we have not been able to do so far. Now, on concluding this video, what are my thoughts on the case? For me, there's a lot of high strangeness going on during parts of the investigation, particularly when the SCPD is under the leadership of Burke. There does seem to be an attempt to slow the investigation, and there's a bewildering effort to contain the investigation within the Suffolk County border. When I hear of Chris Slope's statements about the snuff film, I'm inclined to believe him, but that's not enough. And with that hesitancy, I believe there was something happening in Suffolk County that certain people do not want the public to know. That would explain the need to keep outside agencies out of the investigation. With all that being said, people will continue to have their own theories, and they will continue to ask, was it the murder of a number of escorts that James Burke was trying to hide? My answer to that is probably not, but maybe. Was Hackett responsible? There certainly seems to be discrepancies in his story, and there are bits of information that he had that I find hard to explain. But I also find it difficult to believe that a man with a prosthetic leg and heart problems could carry a woman across the marshy terrain where Shannon Gilbert was found, though maybe he was aided by somebody else. In short, we are just going to have to wait this one out and hope that an up until now unreleased piece of information may open the case up. Before we end this video, I would like to mention the victims. They were targeted because an unknown man believed they would be simply forgotten. He believed them to be of no value. But they did have value and continue to be loved by a large circle of family and friends. There was a lot of information I had to leave out. However, one thing I know is this was not the life they had chosen. In many of the cases, they had turned to the sex industry as a way of making ends meet. Some of them did so to support young children, while others had dreams of opening their own businesses. At the end of the day, I can only hope that they and their families get justice, because the man who committed these murders has, in the words of Dominic Verone, forfeited his right to walk this earth. Thank you all for watching, and if you have any thoughts on the case or the information covered, please let us know what you think in the comment section below. Also, if you like the content, please make sure to like, share and subscribe, and we'll see you all next time for another episode of Mystery Scope. Until then, take care.